IB Nation, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Ryan, this is our first game predictions show of the 2023 season, man. I'm trying to stay calm. I'm trying to, hey, let's be professional. But, man, I'm fired up. Not just for Notre Dame, Ryan. I'm fired up for some football, man. I cannot wait.
Absolutely.
I'm excited about, man, I can't wait to watch that Vandy Hawaii game. That's how fired up I am right now about the season. I will be watching that. I will be watching Louisiana Tech. I'll be watching, New Mexico State and somebody else I don't necessarily care about, but I will be watching all
USC, San Jose State. I mean,
cannot wait, man. Cannot wait.
Yeah.
Football season is upon us. Notre Dame kicks the season off this weekend, Ryan. And you know what? I realized something before we started the show today. We did a bunch of different prediction shows. Vince and I did one. Sean did one last night. We have never got Ryan Roberts on the record about what he expects for the Notre Dame 2023 football team. So I'm going to get that from him in a second. Then we're going to dive into some keys to victory for Notre Dame. And then we are going to make our predictions for this weekend's game between Notre Dame and Navy. So, Ryan, before we get going, man, just want to get your thoughts on, before the season kicks off, what's your record prediction? Just how good do you think this Notre Dame team is going to be? What's your postseason prediction? All that kind of stuff. Let's hear it, man.
I'm in on this team, Brian. I really am. I mean, I think last year going into the 2022 season, I was optimistic that a lot of things were going to happen, right? And then obviously quarterback injury, wide receivers are still a little bit slow to get going. Offensive line is very slow to get going. Defense isn't opportunistic at all. Like, they barely are forcing any turnovers early in the season. I just feel a lot better about this team, man. I really do. And I remember when we were sitting at Syracuse together, right? We're watching that game, and I'm just like, literally, and this is legitimately what I said to Brian. I'm like, if Notre Dame had a good quarterback, just a good one, not even a great one, but a good quarterback, they're a really good football team, man. Like, they have potential to be very good. So I'm bought into this team because I think there's more known commodities this year than what we had last year. That's kind of how I feel about it. You have a quarterback that you know is going to be a dude. You have 3 returning offensive linemen that were playing good football last year. You have a defense that returns a whole lot of starters on a defense that was pretty solid last year and should only get better. And you have a little bit more known in year 2 under Marcus Freeman. All that together, I think Notre Dame has a chance to be a very good team in 2023. I'm going to pick 11-1. I'm not going to do the homer thing and say they're going to run the table. They're going to go 12-0. I think they go 2-1 in those 3 pivotal matchups against Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. I think they go 2-1 in those contests. They figure out how to defeat the teams that they should beat, which was a crutch, to them last year. You figure that out. I think Notre Dame has a chance to go 11-1. And if they go 11-1 with the schedule they have, I think that they are going to go to the college football playoffs. So I'm bullish on this team, man. I think they have a chance to be a very good team in 2023.
It was kind of funny, Ryan. I was laughing when you said I'm not going to do the homer pick and say they're going to go 12-0. That's kind of what I did, but not really what I did, because we went through the schedule game by game, and I picked them to win every game, because my whole thing is I can't point to a game that I'm like, yeah, I think they're going to definitely lose that game, right? But when I pull back and say, okay, if you're going to ask me what I think the record is going to be without any context of going game by game, I say 11-1. Whether it's going 2-1 against the Big Three, whether it's beating them and having a stub your toe moment like Clemson had in 2016, against Pitt. This is a really good football team. And like you said, once the quarterback position got solidified, and I remember you saying that. I absolutely remember you saying that.
Yep.
And when you look back last year and just think about, what this team would be if they would have just had a better quarterback. How many times did you and I discuss last year on the air and off the air, man, if Jack Cohn just would have had one more year, right? And what that team would have been like last year. Well, now you get a even better version of Jack Cohn, in my opinion, and Sam Hartman.
I think that Syracuse game was a great reminder, though, Brian, because people only remember Syracuse for kind of hobbling down the stretch, but that was when Syracuse was still at full strength.
Well,
Garrett Strader hadn't gotten banged up yet. Garrett Williams was still playing high level football. They were 6-1, I think, coming into that
right, and
football
their only
game.
loss
And
was like a 3-point loss to Clemson. And what was the reason they were hobbled down the stretch? Because Notre Dame physically beat the
they beat them up.
mess out of them that day in the
Yep.
trenches. I mean, that was a big reason Syracuse was so depleted down the stretch, is because of
Yep.
what Notre Dame did to them
That
during the season.
that was
So
that was a good Syracuse team, and that was another one of those games similar to Clemson, where people don't remember this as much in the Syracuse game, but Notre Dame did not light the world on fire from a throwing perspective in that
no,
football game either. They ran down Syracuse's throat the entire game
no.
and played advantageous defense. The pick six by Brandon Joseph, the defense was kind of flying around. The Carlos Del Rio Wilson kid came in and gave him a little bit of life early when he was in, but then obviously he fizzled at the end too. Notre Dame dominated that football game, but that was another one of those Clemson Syracuse where it's very obvious that if Notre Dame had better quarterback play, more consistent quarterback play, that they had a chance to be really good last
Yeah.
season if everything came together right. 2023, I think you feel better about where the offensive line is to start the season. I think you feel better about the defensive unit as a whole compared to what it started out with last year. I really think that the coaching year two comparative to year one is going to take a massive step forward. So yeah, man, I'm going to take this. If I end up being wrong, I'll own it and keep moving on. But I really think this could be one of the best Notre Dame teams I have seen in my lifetime. I truly do.
It's going to start off this weekend, Ryan, against Navy, right?
Yeah.
We're going to get our first taste of what this Notre Dame football team is going to be. We're gonna have one of three reactions, right? One is obviously, yep, they're going to be as good as right. Like I can prepare y'all, don't overreact, but it's going to happen. And the reactions are going to be one of three ways. One is they look great, and it's this is exactly what I think this team could be. Number two is okay, they won, but there's work to do, which would be a fair take. And then number three
Sure.
is here we go again. Even with a win, here we go again. And there's going to be some of that reaction as well. But I'm just looking forward to seeing what this team is. I'll almost deal with the overreactions if it means that we get actually watch real football. That's what I'm
Absolutely.
excited about, Ryan.
Yep.
We're going to kick things off today by doing a bit of a keys to victory. And it won't be quite as long and extensive as the shows we've done in the past because we're kind of combining shows here, Ryan. But I want to talk about the 3 or 4 areas each week that we feel are really key aspects to Notre Dame being able to play to their full potential, which means winning a football game.
Yep.
And we'll start with the offense and then we'll go to the defense. But first, Ryan, I want to start with the Notre Dame offense. And when I look at this unit, obviously there's a lot of things about this group that we've got to learn about Notre Dame. When you look at keys to victory for the offense, it comes down to first and foremost playing to your strengths, and then the second aspect of it, and it's more 1A, 1B as opposed to 1 and 2, is
Sure.
you've got to be able to neutralize where Navy's very strong. And unlike past Navy teams, this Navy team actually has an aspect of their team that is really, really good. The very best part of this Navy team in any facet is their run defense, and we'll get into that. So that's kind of where it comes from is building to your strengths, minimizing their weaknesses or their strengths, and then what are some of the big picture things that have to happen. And I think the first thing for Notre Dame in this game, and this is something that we talk about week after week, and I'm not going to make it as much of a focal point this year as we did last year, but I do think it's important in this game because it is game number 1. Is the first thing is to start fast. And it's not so much from a schematic or here's how it impacts the option. And if you start fast, it puts Navy, behind, and can their option, with the new clock rules impact that? That's all important, Ryan. But
Sure.
the main thing for me is with so many young players, the offensive side is where there are young players. There are guys that have played but not played as much. The offense doesn't have nearly the experience that the defense does, first
Yep.
and second team. That's especially true at the skill positions. Chris Tyree leads this team in career receptions and career receiving yards, but he's never done it as a wide receiver. Tobias Merriweather gets his first shot as a starter. There's a lot of new faces. The faster they start, the more confidence they build, and it not only impacts this game, but it really sends them on a positive note. So that's why starting fast for me is priority number 1 for this Notre Dame offense.
I mean, I think it just feels like a completely different chapter of Notre Dame football, doesn't it? I mean, obviously compared to year one, because year one, Notre Dame, if they were going to be successful in 2022, they had to be a ball control, run the football type of team. They had to. And although I still think that's going to be the identity, the ability to run the football and to be a physical up front, this team, I think, has more multiple layers to it, right? Your ability to pass the football, I think, is just going to be at a much higher level and much higher consistency. And I am interested to see personally from Jared Parker's perspective and this offensive perspective, what is their ideology to starting fast? I think that's an interesting conversation. Is starting fast could look so many different ways, right? Where you're just ramming it down their throat. Like Syracuse last year for Notre Dame, the one I used, that was a fast start offensively.
Yeah.
It was just not the fast start that people usually think of when they think of fast starts. They usually think about throwing the football, taking a shot, open up the field a little bit. But regardless, they got off to a fast start. And I agree, Notre Dame needs to have that because there's no real reason not to have that against this team, right? Is that, yes, they are a tough run stopping defense, but there are a lot of positions that Notre Dame can take easy advantage of athletically, right? Like they have athleticism advantage in almost every single spot over Navy. You have a 60-year starting quarterback. I fully understand that Sam Hartman hasn't started a game for the University of Notre Dame yet, but that experience matters, right? All the snaps that he's played, all the passes he's thrown, all the touchdowns that he's accounted for, all that stuff really matters. So 6-year starting quarterback, 3 returning offensive linemen. Yes, some wide receivers in different spots, but they've all played football as well. They all have experience of playing high-level football at the University of Notre Dame. Your leading rusher returning. Notre Dame have no choice but to start fast. I mean, if they don't start fast in this game, eyebrows will be raised, in my opinion, a little bit, right? They will be because you have everything you need from an experience level, from a talent level for this team to be very good in 2023, but also to get off to a fast start because you don't have inexperienced at quarterback. You don't have some offensive linemen still getting into their own, wide receivers who haven't played as much football. You have experience on your side offensively, so a fast start is very, very important.
Now, what are some of the keys to a fast start? These next 2 points are going to really be about that. Number one is have a plan to beat the blitz. That's going to be a big part of this. Navy is going to come. They're going to blitz early. They're going to blitz often. They're going to blitz from different angles. And their blitzing package is a very sound blitzing package, as we've broken down. So it's not just as easy as throw a slant behind it, right? You try and do that, and all of a sudden the safety steps in front of it, and he picks it off or lights your receiver up. You've got to have a sound blitz plan, and that's going to include a lot of different aspects. It's going to involve mixing up the run game, which we'll get to here in a minute. It's going to involve being effective, having a pass game plan to beat it. That's going to involve out-breaking routes, in-breaking routes, deep shots. You got to mix it up. A well-designed screen game is going to be key. Navy's pretty good at sniffing out the screens, like the traditional screens, the slip screens, things like that. That's not necessarily what I'm referring to. It's more, for me, it's more of if you can catch them on a bubble or a now when they're bringing an all-out blitz, you're one missed tackle away or one broken tackle away from it going to the house, right? It's those type of things that are going to be part of it. And I think the RPO game is going to be part of that as well, Ryan, because Navy is when we talk about beating the blitz, their primary blitzing strategy is run blitzes. They're a heavy run blitz team. And that's where the RPO game can have a major, major impact, Ryan. But you've got to have a plan to beat the blitz. But even more importantly, and this is a point that you brought up when we were discussing it, and I'll let you dive into it, Ryan, your plan to beat the blitz in the first half can't be your only plan to beat the blitz, because this team, exactly, this defensive coaching staff is going to know how to adapt, know how to adjust. And we saw it last year. Talk about that was the biggest dichotomy between a first half and a second half that I've ever seen from Notre Dame, even more so than like 2006 Michigan State. They were so good in the first half, scored 35 points. And in the second half, they went 3 and out on every series except for one. The one series they didn't go 3 and out. They had 6 plays, -1 yards, because they couldn't adjust. They couldn't adapt player-wise and coach-wise. That can't happen in this game, Ryan.
Well, I think that the RPO game is a great point that you make, Brian, because people think of it as an offensive structure, but in reality, it is a blitz beater in itself, right? As far as you're trying to take advantage of space that has been vacated for whatever reason. You're trying to predicate on movement. It's the same thing with screens, the same thing with draws, it's the same thing with different spacing concepts. All those things are taking advantage and easy checkdowns, those types of things. But we were talking about it beforehand, man. And I was at that Navy game last year, right? I was down in Baltimore, and I just remember I think they had like 300 total yards in that first
Yeah.
half or something like that offensively. In the second half, it was like 10, something like that.
Yeah.
It was like something crazy. You said it perfectly. I mean, they were the biggest absolute parallels that I've ever seen in a football game. Notre Dame had every answer in the first half, and they had zero in the seconds, right? There is there's two stories to a game typically, right? It's what you come out in, your game plan of what you come out in that first half, and then what your adjustments are usually in the second half to be able to either continue momentum or break it, depending on how the game is flowing. And I really think last year, this is no shade at Tommy Rees, this is no shade at the offensive coach staff in general. Notre Dame didn't have answers last year. You didn't have answers. And partly it wasn't fully their fault because I understand that Notre Dame was working against itself a little bit at quarterback, and it was just a little bit difficult, not seeing things incredibly fast and everything. But still, Notre Dame did not have answers in the second half last year against Navy, as many as they needed to. They just didn't. This year, with Jared Parker, I expect the offense to get off to a fast start because I think Jared Parker is going to be able to scheme some stuff up that's going to be exciting. The question, though, for every time you have an offensive coordinator who's truly a first-year offensive coordinator, I don't count West Virginia, I just don't, is what is he going to do when the defense pulls something out that you weren't expecting or that you don't have an adjustment to? Can you adjust on the fly? Do you have something built in? That's the question.
Or what your plan was isn't going the way you thought it was going to go. That happens to the best
And you have to
coordinators.
pivot. You have to
Right,
pivot.
it happens. Sometimes, hey, the plan we thought we were going to do, this worked for us, but it's just not working. We thought we could really run this concept. We thought we could run this play, and we're just not having the success with it. What are your adjustments? How quickly on the fly can you say, hey, here's where we need to go? And that's something we're going to learn about this coaching staff. And it's a coaching staff that's working together for the first time, right? I mean, you've got 5 offensive coaches, 3 of them are back from last year's staff, but one of them's in a new role. So how are they going to be able to adjust? That's going to be a big part of it. And number 3, Ryan, the point is kind of part of it, right? It's part of starting fast. These are the way we like to do keys to the game is we like to do building blocks. I think that's what an effective game plan is. It's building blocks. It's on top of each other. It all kind of goes together.
Yeah.
And so the third part we already talked about, obviously, starting fast. We talked about having a plan for the blitz. And one of the best things that Notre Dame can do is they have to have a more diverse run game this year against Navy than they did last year. Last year was inside zone and duo, basically. And when that wasn't working, they didn't have a lot of other stuff they could hang their hat on. And it was able to just kind of shut it down. And they said, I would just throw the football. Well, that looked great in the first half. Second half, you couldn't throw the football. And now you already couldn't run the football. Now you can't throw the football. And Notre Dame literally had nothing they could do. Yeah. That can't ever happen to the University of Notre Dame. I don't care if you're playing Alabama. I don't care if you're playing who you're playing, Georgia. I don't care who you're playing. That's not acceptable. And it won't be acceptable this year. There will be no, well, it's his first game as coordinator. No, that's part of your job, right? It's having those answers. And one thing that we've seen in practice is a more diverse run game. The different things that we've seen. I've seen at least 6 or 7 concepts repped consistently throughout the year. And I'm just talking broad concepts, not even wrinkles within those concepts. So I want to see those things be effective, Ryan. I want to see them work. I want to see them have an early game plan of mixing those things up. If duo and inside zone are going to be your bread and butters this year, I don't know that I'd run them right away. I would say, hey, look, we're going to throw some other stuff at you.
Give them different looks.
Right. Look, we're going to run a toss crack on the first play of the game, something like that. Part of that also includes a mixing up the run game, includes doing things to change the eye discipline of the linebackers, Ryan. This is going to be huge. And it's not just with motions and shifts, things that you're showing pre-snap. Those are important, but you've got to do something out of those. You can't just shift for the sake of shifting or jet motion for the sake of jet, because eventually linebackers, they're just going to run by and you're like, well, I don't care. You're not doing anything with that guy. That's just all for show. Yep. Whether that's jet sweeps, whether that's reverses, whether that's quick perimeter screens, the RPO game is going to be part of that. There needs to be more diversity of the run game, and it can't just be line up in 12 personnel all day and hope that we can get leverage or numbers advantages. That can work against base defenses. It's harder to do that against Navy because they're pretty well schemed at eliminating some of those disadvantages with their quickness and the pressures that they bring. So having a really mixed up run game, a real diverse run game, that means multiple concepts. That means running these plays out of multiple concepts, being able to run out of 11 personnel effectively, being able to run out of 12 personnel effectively. I would love to see them do some 20 personnel in this game. Like I'm telling you, the dream for me, Ryan, is the day that we line up as a wrinkle and Notre Dame goes 20 personnel with 2 backs and Chris Tyree is one of their 3 receivers. So you're in 30 personnel basically from last year.
Yeah.
And say, hey, look, we're going to do some things because you're going to have to think about how you want to come at us, because we now have a lot of speed that we can attack you with outside if you get a little bit too, inside oriented, and just keep Navy on their toes, because if they can slow Navy down schematically, meaning they've got to think twice about bringing all those pressures, that's how you then start to hammer them in the second half. Because Notre Dame may not even have a ton of success in the first half running the football, Ryan, but it's keep them on their toes, just keep leaning on them, and then eventually in the second half, you're going to have some answers, and you're going to say, now we're going to really take it to you. And so to me, mixing up the run game schematically, formationally, tempo wise are all things that are very important to this football game.
I think eye candy is a perfect way to put it, because there's 2 ways to stop pressure, right? One is that you go where the pressure's coming from. You throw behind it, you screen it, that type of stuff. Number 2, Brian, is to start making pressure start thinking, right? Like, oh man, I have to adjust on the fly, and I'm blitzing the wrong gap because the gap's moving differently than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was setting up for inside zone or do all game, and then all of a sudden it's outside zone and the gap is expanding laterally, and now I have to adjust my angle of pursuit, and all those things happen on the fly. And right now, what are the best parts of the Navy defense? If you ask me, I would say the defensive line is salty. They're tough. They're physical kids. The Busick kid, the nose guard's a pretty good football player, plays with good leverage. And the Colin Ramos kid is their leading returning tackler, playing inside linebacker. He's 5'11", 205 pounds, folks. He's not winning because he's so much better than Audric Estime or any other running back that he's facing. He's winning because he's a tough kid that goes to the right spot. That's why he's winning. So you have to force that kid to get uncomfortable, right? Force him to get uncomfortable. And the way you do that is by that diversity, right? Like we're going to talk about just simple stuff as far as, not simple stuff, but we're going to talk about stuff as far as doing things differently, not running inside zone and dual all the time, maybe mixing in some outside zones, some pin and pull stuff. But also, you now have Chris Tyree as a absolute weapon as a slot receiver. How about giving him some jet motions at times, right? You don't even have to give him the football, but get those linebackers' eyes moving, man. I want to see those eyes get all over the place, because it is a very cliched thing in the game of football that the game is one, it's a game of inches, right? That's the most cliche thing in the world, but it's true. It's very true. You give Chris Tyree another few inches, he's going to house call it compared to getting tackled for a 1-yard gain. Like, that is the reality we live in. So yes, get the eyes moving on the second level, make them uncomfortable, and you do that by run game diversity. Don't let them just know every single play where Audric Estime is going to go. That's the worst thing you could do, because when you get them uncomfortable, Audric Estime is going to get on a lot more one-on-one situations. And if he's in one-on-one situation as a 6 foot, 227 battering ram against a 5'11", 205-pound linebacker, all due respect to Colin Ramos, I will take Audric Estime in that matchup every single day and twice on Saturdays.
Last aspect of it, Ryan, and one thing that's not going to be one of our keys to game is big plays, because I think big plays to me will be important, but they're going to be a byproduct of other things and byproduct of the things that we talked about. So yes, I want big plays, but they have to come on the backs of what you're doing run game, which then sets up big play opportunities in the play action game. Play action game isn't going to get you big plays. Maybe you can hit one early in the game, but it's not going to get you big plays in the third, fourth quarter if you're not running the football. If you don't have a plan that puts pressure on Navy running the football, that's going to be an important part of that. And then that builds into another part that's going to lead to big plays. Again, that's the thing. Lay that foundation. And the biggest thing for me, Ryan, and this is kind of our last point, as we've said before, we do building blocks. So point number 4 isn't the least important part. It's just this is a building block of these other things. And it really comes down to efficiency. And efficiency to me in the pass game is primarily what we're looking at here. And here's why these are important for this game specifically, because I think efficiency in the pass game is always important. What do we always say? You need an efficient and explosive offense. If you're just explosive but not efficient, you have the 2017 offense. You have the 2015 offense, which when you play a really good defense that can limit the big plays, you're in trouble, right? Georgia limited the big plays against Notre Dame in 2017. The offense couldn't do anything. Miami limited the big plays after the first series. Notre Dame offense couldn't do anything because they didn't have the efficiency. What killed them in some of those big games? They were constantly getting themselves in 2nd and 10, 3rd and 9 because they were able to, limit some of those big plays, and you weren't an efficient offense. You've got to stay ahead of the chains in this game, Ryan. You've got to get yourself in 2nd and shorts, 3rd and shorts, to where now everything that we have in our offense is on the table on 3rd down, right? If you're just going to get back in 3rd and 9s and 3rd and 10s, yeah, you can hit those. Notre Dame, one of the few first downs Notre Dame had last year, actually one of the few 3rd downs that they landed last year was a 3rd and 15 where they hit Deion Colsey on a deep end cut, right? You can hit some of those, but that's not where you're going to make your living, right? Yeah, you hit it that time, but then the next series that you were in 3rd and long, you didn't get it because it's a low percentage situation for you. Getting Navy on their backs, getting Navy moving back and back, getting him into short yard situations is where this offense has to be, because what happens in those situations, Ryan, is not only do you get ahead of the sticks, leave your whole offense on there, but if Navy's getting into some of these down and distances where it's 2nd and 1, 2nd and 2, you say, hey, look, we're going to put our big boys in the field and line up and say we're going to run it at you. You think, but now that we're in a 2nd and short, we can take a shot now. We can go 12 personnel, 13 personnel, and say, hey, we're going to take a shot outside to Tobias or to Jaden Thomas or whoever out there, because we're in 2nd and 1. We feel good about our ability to convert 3rd and 1 and go at it. But when you start getting behind the sticks, it's 2nd and 12, 2nd and 9, and then you only get 2-3 yards in the run, and now all of a sudden it's 3rd and 7, and they know you're throwing the football. And there's just a lot less things that you can do at that point in time. So staying ahead of the sticks, which comes down efficiency in the pass game, it also includes effectively executing your RPO game, Ryan. I mean, that's, you and I talked about that earlier, right? The RPO game is important. They want to load the box on 1st and 10. Like, honestly, if Notre Dame throws the ball in the first 15 plays because Navy's just crashing, they're just pulling and throwing RPOs and just going up and down the field, whatever. I mean, that's a hyperbolic thing to say. But my point is, if Navy wants to just say, hey, we're going to just load the box and we're going to come at you and we're going to bring our bandit off the edge of the whole game, that's fine. We're just pulling and throwing. I'm fine. I'm just going to pull and throw a quick speed out to Chris Tyree or a bubble screen to Chris Tyree, and you better pray your safety can get to him in time. I was going to fine. I'll just take that one-on-one shot downfield to Tobias Merriweather or Jaden Thomas or whoever. That's going to be a big part of this. Is RPO game is going to be a key to that efficiency we talked about. And I think back to the 2018 game, Ryan, and I don't know if you remember this, but Navy was really coming at Notre Dame that year defensively. And if you remember, that was, I think Buddy Green was still their defensive coordinator at the time. And he was their defensive coordinator for a long time. Really good football coach. Now, they didn't have a great defense that year, but I remember one of the keys to Notre Dame in that game that season was Navy was saying, hey, look, we can't stop this Notre Dame run game, so we're just going to load the box. And Ian Book went like 8 of 9 on RPOs in the first half. Yeah. And he just picked Navy apart and just, and eventually that led to them starting to gash and running the football. Something similar here would be great, and so get those early, spread the field widthwise, spread the field vertically, all that other kind of stuff. But it's built on the back of being a very efficient, ahead of the sticks, stay on schedule type of offense. That's going to be a huge part of this game for the offense.
How many times last year, Brian, did Notre Dame throw a slide route into the dirt on 1st and 10, and you're just like, dang, dude, now we're in 2nd and 10. Like, that stinks, Like, it's just, oh, man, the Cal game, right? Like, I think they missed 2 different slides in that game, from Pine, and it was just like, man, this is just not good. It's not efficient at all. And I think that the biggest thing, and we could, I mean, honestly, this conversation could go either side of it, right, is that if I'm a coach and I'm a successful play caller, usually why I'm a successful play caller is because I have options, right? I have a lot of different options, because if you have options, you become a lot less predictable. The efficiency, I think, really starts to suffer for teams when they don't have an aspect of their game that is up to par and they become a very predictable offense. That they're just a power running team. They're just an outside zone team. They can't throw the football effectively. They can't run the football effectively. Like, whatever layer it is, that makes a team super predictable and inefficient in a lot of ways. And I think that's what happened to Notre Dame a lot last year, honestly, is even in some of the games where Notre Dame won, it was just, you knew that you won off of just holding the ball, but not necessarily being efficient with that, right? Like you weren't passing the football at a high clip. You weren't completing a high number of passes, a high completion percentage in general. And I think that this game for me is one of those things where their pressure is definitely predicated on stopping the run more often than not. We also did see them last year in the second half say, all right, we're kitchen sink on 3rd and long, right? And having Drew Pine have to just sit back and try to make a play, and then the pressure would get to him and the play wouldn't be made. And I think for me, you have the building blocks of a really good offense in 2023. You have a really good running back and a talented running back room behind Audric Estimate. You have a quarterback that has shown that he has ability to make plays as an RPO passer and as a drop back passer in the vertical passing game. You have options in theory, on paper, offensively. The practicality now approach is that you have to go show it, man. You have to. And the efficiency starts with good play calling, but it now extends to when you have an easy throw, you have to make it. When you have an RPO look that's wide open, you have to hit it. When you have a rushing lane, don't stutter step in the hole, hit that hole and gain the yardage that is there, the hidden yardage on a lot of plays. Don't shoot yourselves in the foot. And that's the biggest thing offensively for most teams. But I think especially for Notre Dame, man, a team that has the ability, I think, to be multiple, just keep everything on schedule. Keep everything on schedule, and this offense should be very good, and that includes in the Navy game, obviously.
So we talked about starting fast. We talked about having a plan to beat the blitz. We talked about having a diverse, multiple run game, and we talked about efficiency. All 4 of those things get off to a fast start, get Navy on their heels, force them to blitz even more, even harder, but have a plan to beat it that includes the run game and an efficient pass game. And what does that lead to, Ryan? That's what leads to the big plays. That's the stuff that leads to those one-on-one opportunities. Hey, they hit us. They because like last year they could just do it. Hey, inside zone, duo, and all that kind of stuff, right? Hey, we're blitzing here because we think duo's coming, but they're actually running counter, or they're running a toss, and all of a sudden we blitzed out of the play, and now they're off, right? All those things lead to that, and if Notre Dame's going to be the explosive offense they need to be, I wrote an article on this last week. I know you read it. When you look at Notre Dame's numbers for big plays, related to the best teams on the schedule, they're way behind. But here's the deal. Those teams are not ripping off big play after big play because they're just designing 20 big play opportunities a game. Right. There are times that you design for that, but it really comes down to when you're executing your offense at a high level, it's going to lead to more opportunities for those big plays to happen. And that's why those 4 things are our keys. And we didn't have necessarily big plays as a key to victory because it, to me, is a byproduct of those other aspects.
Unpredictable offenses create big plays because the opposing defense has no idea what's coming at them. And that's when teams make big plays because it's a guessing game at that point. I mean, I called defenses before, right? And there's a feel to calling a game defensively, right? There's a feel. You're going off of what you think's coming on the other side. What are they going to run? What personnel group are they in? What are their tendencies in that group? And the minute they don't have as many clear tendencies is the minute that you are not feeling confident in your call and you're second guessing yourselves and you are attacking something that isn't there. I mean, unpredictability is the scariest thing for an opposing coordinator, the scariest thing in the world. And I think that's what Notre Dame has a chance to be in 2023. And that's also why 2022, game to game, it was so volatile, right? Why can you run the ball so well against Clemson, but you couldn't run the ball well against Navy? Why couldn't you not run the ball well against USC, but you could run it all over North Carolina? It's because Notre Dame was a predictable offense last year. So sure, it'll work sometimes, but it's not going to be consistent, right? It's not going to be sustainable because at the end of the day, Notre Dame was a predictable offense last year. They were.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, Ryan, and talk about the keys to victory for the Notre Dame defense in this game. And we're going to try to not use the same kind of the trying to think of the keys to beating Navy are always the same.
Blueprint.
Always the same.
Right.
We're just going to try to look at them from a little bit of a different angle, so we're just not repeating the same exact things we did last year. Like I literally I wrote my keys to the game out, and I pulled up the last 2 Navy articles, and I'm like, these are the same thing. And it's because it's the truth. There are certain principles that are key to beating the triple option, or beating a triple option team. So some of them are going to be repeats, but we're going to try to look at it just from a little bit of a different angle to get some of these things. And so it's going to sound familiar, but we're just going to try to say it a little bit differently. Number one, big picture, Ryan, I believe the best way to stop the triple option is to have an aggressive, deep defense that attacks. We talked about that yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at it, it's force. I've talked about this in the past. When you looked at Stanford back when Chip Kelly was there, and then Mark Helfrich was there, and at Oregon, and it seemed like the only team that could ever occasionally stop Oregon was Stanford.
Yeah.
And the reason why is they would just attack that spread, because the way that Chip Kelly runs his version of the spread back then, it was essentially a triple option offense. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it was.
That's what it is.
And so what they would do is they would attack the mesh and force the quarterback to make his decision sooner, because the moment he has to pull in, either give or pull and do something, he's now declared this is where the ball's going, and you can fly to the ball. You had that great interview yesterday with Career Martini, and what was his main message, right? Get to the ball.
Yes.
The longer that the quarterback can stay in his right action, the longer it is where you don't really know where the ball's going.
Yep.
Right. And so the minute that if you're just crashing that fullback, and we'll get to that here in a second, you've got to be aggressive. You got to force them to declare this is where the ball is going to go. And then force them to get into where, hey, we can't really run the option today. We've got to run designed runs because the option is just getting blown up. That's a win for you, because now it becomes your guys versus our guys, and they have no chance at that point in time. So you've got to attack, but here's the other mistake that people make against the option. It's not so much attack that we're going to blitz all day. You do not want to blitz the option, because when you blitz the option and you miss, it's gone, right? You've got to be disciplined within it. Your aggressiveness just comes from, here's your assignment, go hard. If your assignment is a fullback, you're not worried about anything else. You blow that dude up, and you get to him quick, and you get to him aggressively, and you blow it up. If your job's a quarterback, then you fly to the quarterback. You get to the quarterback, and you hit him hard, and you force him to do whatever. Those are the aspects you got to do, because you could blow it up, miss assignment, 50-yard gain on a dive because you missed your backside gap. Yep. Right. So there is also a level of discipline that comes to playing the option. You just can't err on the side of, okay, we don't want to make a mistake, so we're going to read and react. And that's exactly what a triple option team wants you to do, because they will just gut you all game, 5 yards, and they will have no problem 4-yarding you to death right up and down the field. No problem. Fine. Yeah, you guys didn't give up any big plays, but we just took 11 minutes off the clock, on one drive. You've got to be aggressive. You got to maintain assignment integrity. That is the foundation of. I mean, we could really get lazy and just say that's the plan on defense. Sure. That's the key. Be aggressive and disciplined. And if you execute that, you're gonna slow them down. There's a little bit more to it, so we'll add a little bit more to it, Ryan. But that is always at the foundation, in my opinion, of a team like Notre Dame being able to stop the option offense.
Why are reps so important when you're facing the option, Brian? Right, like we talk about it, them taking time out of their part of spring and part of every session of daily on a daily perspective. It's because when you rep something so much, it becomes muscle memory at that point, right? I know where my eyes are going. I know what my track is. I know all those different types of things. And that is the key to stopping the option, is that you don't want to think, right? The minute that you think playing the option is the minute that you get stuck or you make a wrong decision. That's where it is. And Greer did talk about that yesterday. He talked about, there's a lot of principles to stopping the triple option, but at the end of the day, man, get to the football, right? Be aggressive and get to the football. Be physical, because you know that that's going to be a physical football game. You know that they're going to hit you guys in the legs as much as possible. You know that it's going to be a grueling football game. But there is nothing that makes anyone more uncomfortable than being pressed, right? Being pressured. They don't want to have to deal with that consistent, just physicality and daunting aggressiveness. And that's what a defense needs to be against a triple option. Make offenses have to read quickly and have to decide and make rash decisions at times, right? That's where a quarterback pulls it when he shouldn't pull it, when he keeps it, when he shouldn't keep it. Those things tend to happen when you are aggressive and fast. Yes. And we used to diagnose it by like position, right? Like in high school, but this is much more simplified. We used to do like inside linebackers and the TNT guys because we ran a 3-man front, right? The tackle, nose tackle. You guys have fullback. You have dive. That's your guy the all game. And then defensive ends, end man on the line of scrimmage. You have quarterback. That is you all day. You have quarterback. And then the alley safeties, like your quarterback to pitch, whatever the first threat is basically outside. It's a lot more, that's very simplified. It's a lot more strategic than that on the college level because obviously Navy is going to do some things out of the triple option that you're not going to see on a high school level, for instance. But the principles remain the same, though, is that offense wants to stay on schedule and keep getting those yardage. Greer also talked about that, of like the worst possible moment in a Navy football game. It's not when you give up a pitch for 40 yards. It's when they just keep getting 4 yards every single play. And you're just like, we're bleeding, man. Like they're bleeding us to death. Like that's kind of where you are. So make that team off of schedule, make them have to think a lot quicker than they want to, force them to be uncomfortable at the end of the day, force the option to be an uncomfortable thing because that team wants to be monotonous. They want to be consistent. They want to be just kind of lull you to sleep, man. Lull you to sleep. Don't let them lull you to sleep. That's the worst thing that can happen against a Navy team.
It's demoralizing to be on the field for like 8-9 minutes because you just can't stop another offense. And they're just 4 yards, 5 yards. They're just pushing you. It is absolutely demoralizing. It's also demoralizing for an option offense when you can't get into rhythm. The option is one of the most rhythm-based offenses that you're ever going to see.
Yes.
And if they can't get into rhythm, they can't function. And it's a very important part of it. So another part of this too, Ryan, is a big key is the quarterback and the fullback are going to touch the ball more than anybody else. That if the offense is really rolling, that's what it comes down to. When you look at past games against Notre Dame, right? And we had somebody yesterday that said, could you imagine Keenan Reynolds and Alexander Teach playing together at Navy at the same time? And you're like, that actually would have been fun to watch. And for me to say that about the triple option is saying something. But like, how do Notre Dame fans know anything about Alexander Teach, right? Like it's because they watched him just destroy Notre Dame, right, as a fullback, and there just was nothing Notre Dame could do about him and stopping him. And we've seen that just about every other time that that Notre Dame has played Navy or had lack of success against Navy. It's the fullback rips you up and you can't stop the fullback. And that's what it kind of boils down to. And we saw that last year, Ryan, is you had a plan, but you didn't stop the fullback. And that kid's back. And so when you look at last year, their fullback had 133 yards on 15 carries. They had a 50-yard gain, but that means he had 83 yards on 14 carries. That's pretty good, right? Yeah. That's good numbers for a fullback. You can't allow that to happen. You've got to be able to shut it down. And so if you can we could say, hey, look, stop the quarterback and the fullback, and that's fine. But that's much easier said than done. The big thing for me, what can be kryptonite to an option team, is just take the fullback out of the game.
Yes.
If you take the fullback out of the game and you're worth a darn, you're gonna win, right? If you're assignment correct and you take the fullback out of the game, I just don't see how Navy can win this football game. That's going to be a big key. Now, it can't just be the same thing every time. You can't just, 3 technique, you're going to take the fullback every time. It can't be that. A smart option team is going to do things to counter that. They're going to run traps. They're going to do different things to say, hey, look, this is your only plan for stopping the fullback. Cool. Here's what we got for you.
Or double dive or something like that.
We're going to show dive backfield action, and you're going to come upfield and you're going to think, hey, I'm unblocked, and then boom, you're ear-holed by a trapping tackle or guard or something like that, right? So you've got to have some level of diversity to it, but in each play, you've got to have a plan for getting to the fullback. And I've always felt like multiple guys need to be on the fullback at different levels.
Yes.
And part of taking the fullback out, Ryan, is you have to have great backside discipline against Navy. Great backside discipline against Navy. because a lot of times where those plays hit is they cut backside because somebody backside got cut or a backside linebacker overflowed, got a little bit too focused on the ball and he over pursues and all of a sudden the fullback's cutting behind him. But again, that's why that discipline comes down to it. But if you take the fullback out, this offense is going to have a tough time because now you're saying, okay, now you got to beat us in the perimeter and now you got to beat us on the football. And with all due respect to Navy, if this becomes a perimeter game, this won't be close. It won't be close.
Great quote from Greer yesterday in the interview, Brian, is that you wanted to stretch out to the perimeter because your athletes are better than their athletes, right?
100%.
Like that's it. Yeah,
100%.
you're 100% correct. It's like you don't want to lose the battle inside against Navy. You want to win. You want to win the battle there and force them to work to the outside. That's what you want to do. And I mean, it's very simple. It's very simple, guys. Like, and I'm not talking down to anyone, right? But we're talking about an option offense. Who is the first option in a triple option offense every single play? It's the fullback for good reason, right? At the end of the day, that's the guy that you want to carry the ball the most. Yeah. Everyone just talks about like the wing backs and stuff because they average a crazy amount of yards per touch, but they do that because they don't touch the ball that much, right? Like they don't do it. So fullbacks are the guy that you want to get going because as we were talking about offensively, kind of being efficient and getting on schedule, it's the same way for Navy, just in a different way, right? That fullback dive gets going. That makes the quarterback better. Yeah. That makes the pitchmen better. The superbacks or whatever the heck they call them in that offense, the whatever. That is what, and then that's also when they start to bleed to death right inside, then that's where that play action pass is right over top of your defense. Like everything works off of that fullback. Everything. He's the most important player. Well, I don't know if I say most important player. He's the most impactful player to an offense, most likely in that regard, as far as
outside of the quarterback, right? Yeah. And that's kind of what it comes down to is you have to have a good quarterback. And there's a reason that Navy was good when they had Ricky Dobbs. There's a reason they went down after he left and then got good again when Keenan Reynolds stepped in and then went down and then got good again when Malcolm Perry stepped in. You know what I mean? Like there's Will Worth. That's a great example too in 2016. Yeah. I mean, but it's a lot easier to stop the quarterback when you've taken the fullback out of the game. That's the point. Yep. And we talked about being aggressive. When you're blowing the fullback up early, I mean, that's where you start getting some fumbled snaps and some muff snaps or because now the quarterback's struggling to get his hands out of there because you're engaged in the fullback and now he's got, oh shoot, I got to pitch it quick. And you'll see quarterbacks take chances all the times and make mistakes like that, Ryan, when they're like, oh shoot, the timing's off. Because then they start rushing. Yeah. And once they start rushing, it's like, that's where you can get a missed pitch or a rush pitch and those kind of things. When they start getting that, you just can't let the option get downhill. Right. That's really what it comes down to. You can't let the quarterback get downhill.
A quarterback hates when the mesh gets messed up too, right? And that comes down. That's not even just a triple option thing. That's just running zone read or power read or whatever. Like they don't want that mesh point to get messed up. Because again, what's that do at the end of the day? Makes them uncomfortable. And defense is all about making offenses uncomfortable. That is the baseline of playing good defensive football is that you make an offense feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to point 3, Ryan. And that is going to be this. We talked about this. It's the exact opposite of what we talked about on offense. It's early down disruptions, right? You want to be on schedule on offense. You want to get yourself in second and shorts and third and shorts. We know who else wants to do that? Navy. Because if they get into a 4th and 3, they're going to go for it a lot. I mean, that's just you talk about the original analytics program. Navy is like, I mean, really under Kenny and Matalolo, they were that. I mean,
they need to be that.
Exactly.
Need to be that.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you get them into 4th and 6s, 4th and 7s, 4th and 8s. Now they start getting into, hey, we got to punt the football away situations. And Notre Dame actually forced several punts from Navy last year. It's just they had so many possessions because the offense just kept going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out in the second half. Navy had like 6 possessions in the second half. There's games that Navy will only have 6 possessions. They had 6 in the second half against Notre Dame last year. So early down success is key, Ryan. And that now this year, that's going to mean a little bit more success stopping the pass. I think we're going to see more 1st and 10 hitch routes. I think we're going to see 1st and 10, bootlegs. You and I kind of joked yesterday, like if they try to get too cute throwing the football, I can see a 1st down, attempt to try to throw a hitch route result in a Cam Hart, Benjamin Morrison pick 6. You know what I mean? but they're
No,
going to do it. They're going to throw the hitch stuff. So I mean, you've got to have some success there, force incompletions. You've got to have negatives, right? What's one of the big keys to Notre Dame defensively this year, Ryan? One of the areas they have to improve. You and I talked about this. We broke it down. I talked about this in a recent show. They have to be more disruptive in the run game. And
yep.
the numbers for Notre Dame last year in run game disruptions were not good. They have to be more disruptive in the run game. They only had 4 tackles for loss against Navy last year, Ryan. And one of those was a sack. I mean, you
Right.
had 3 run plays that resulted in negative yards. That to me is just that's not good enough. You have to do better. You have to do better. And they had 6 the year before, and that even wasn't great, in my opinion. You have to be disruptive. You have to blow it up. You had 8 in 2019 when you had a lot of success against them. When Navy's good, you have to force negatives, in my opinion. And negatives to me, Ryan, are zeros and minuses. So it also includes stuffs. If Navy's running something on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 9 and they get nothing, that to me is that's a negative for the offense, right? But you have to get disruptions. You have to force. I mean, if you can get the ball on the ground 4 or 5 times, I don't care if Navy recovers all of them. That's a win for you. Now, it'd be better for you to force to put the ball on the ground and get it, right? Turnovers are going to be key, or can be key. They can be demoralizing for an option offense more than even other offenses. But if you're forcing a bad pitch and the halfback has to kind of run around and scramble and pick it up, get tackled, guess what? That's a -7. Series over if you're disciplined, right? So disruptions are going to be key, especially in early downs. If you can put them behind the sticks on 1st and 2nd down, that the Navy offense becomes, I mean, that's kryptonite. Getting dominated on 1st and 2nd down is kryptonite to an option offense.
Well, I mean, think about it last year for Notre Dame, Brian. I gave an example earlier when, like the Cal game, when the slide route got thrown in the ground and you're 2nd and 10, you feel demoralized a little bit, don't you? It's like, man, 2nd and 10 is not where Notre Dame wants to be. Well, now escalate that a little bit because now we're talking about a team that's going to run the ball at a much higher clip than even what Notre Dame is going to do, right? Like that's their dependency is the ability to run the football. And even if they do throw the ball more, I don't think it's going to be a ton more, right? Like they're going to throw the ball
5 times,
more.
5, 6, 7
Yeah,
times a game. I mean, that's it.
right.
They're not going to come out throwing 35 times tomorrow, Saturday,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And if they do, great.
That's the biggest thing, man, is that if Navy has a epiphany and they're like, you know what? We're going to come out and throw the ball against Notre Dame. Please do.
Thank you.
Like,
Thank you.
please,
Thank you.
please, right? Like, please, man. I really hope that that's the case because at the end of the day, Navy does not throw the ball a ton. Why? Because they don't have athletes outside that can play with Notre Dame
Right.
or most teams that they play.
Right.
That's the case of it. I mean, call it what it is. Someone said in the chat, I think at some point of like, does Navy have any wide receiver that threatens either of our corners outside? And it's like, no, they don't. And that's the point. Some years they do. You know, they have a Jameer Tillman who's a good football player, right? Who like, yeah, he can take advantage of you occasionally if he makes a nice play. Yeah. But Notre Dame has better athletes than Navy does. And if they decide that they want to make it a space game, they want to play a more open space, okay, sounds great to me.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, there might be a slight altering of identity, but we're not changing the identity of Navy. At the core of what they want to be, they want to run the football, they want to control the clock, and they want to play ahead of the sticks, not behind it. Put them behind it. I feel good about Notre Dame's chances defensively to stop them in the passing game if they have to.
One of the best offenses Navy had of the last 15 years was the 2016 offense. I mean, just look at the numbers. I think it was their 2nd best scoring offense. It was their best scoring offense because they scored more in 2016, 37.9 than they scored the year before with Keenan Reynolds at 36.8. And the year that Malcolm Perry was insanely good with over 2,000 rushing yards, they were 37.2. What was the difference about that Navy team that year? They had a quarterback that could legitimately throw the football in Will Worth, and they had a legitimate Power 5 athlete, a wide receiver in Jameer Tillman, to your point. 6'4", 210, legit athlete. You remember that 4th down conversion where he beat, I think, Dante Vaughn on an in-cut. That was a legit route in a legit ball. They don't have that guy. Like you said, they don't have that guy. And it's just not who they are. But even then, that team, as good as they were throwing the football, Will Worth passed for under 1,400 yards that year.
Right.
I mean, it's just not who they want to be. They want to be real efficient at it, but they're not doing it a lot. You've got to be able to get them in situations where they kind of have to throw it, because that's when Navy that's when some of the turnovers come. Last key, Ryan, and this is we don't have to spend a lot of time on this one because it's obvious. If you do all those things, if you're aggressive and you're getting negatives and you're blowing up the fullback and all those kind of things, the thing that can just undermine all of that is big plays.
Yeah.
Got to limit the big plays against Navy. It's going to be key. If you're playing good football, you can't allow those mistakes like we saw last year, whether it be big plays that they're happening because, you're letting a guy loose, or a big play where you stop a guy on third down and you grab his face mask, right? And it's all of that. You can't have the bad plays that result in cheap first downs and cheap yards. You have to limit that stuff, right? That means being disciplined, means tackling long space, being assignment correct, all of that. You have to be smart. And if they do that, then they're going to be fine on Saturday.
It's all interrelated to your point before, right, Brian? Is that if Navy does start getting some explosive plays, it's probably because their offense is working a little bit, right? They're probably getting some decent runs, and then all of a sudden, Croy Myers is wide open over the top as a wide receiver, or one of their wing backs is getting a late pitch from Ty Levite and hits the corner and is able to create a big play. Like, those things are backbreaking at points, right? I mean, and it always seems that when Navy's given Notre Dame problems, it always happens at the worst possible situation, right? Like a 3rd and 5 and they hit it one over your head, or a crucial play in the 4th down. Like, it just always seems like it happens in one of those situations. So yeah, man, they can be backbreaking. But more than anything, it's a rhythm-based offense where I think an indicator of how the game's going defensively is if they're creating explosive plays, it probably means they're winning on first down a ton. It probably means their offense is running efficiently. That's like the worst case scenario if they're creating big plays, man. Because it isn't a big play offense. Like, it's really not. Like, there's no player on this offense that I look at it and say that kid can present some problems, to your point, right? There is no Jameer Tillman. There's no Malcolm Perry at running back. There's no at quarterback. There's no Keenan Reynolds at quarterback or wing back.
You were correct on Malcolm Perry when you said that, right? Because remember, he started as a slot back, so you were actually.
He was a really good slot back.
Yes, he was.
A really good slot back.
Yes, he was.
But Navy made a very good judgment there, though, because they were like, you know what? He's not touching the ball enough. Like, we're putting him in a quarterback all the time. He's not touching the ball enough. But they don't have that guy. They don't have a Ricky Dobbs. Right. They don't even have a Will Worth. They don't have that guy at quarterback that's going to create explosive plays. Notre Dame has to limit that, because I think that shows structurally that your defense is working that day if they're not letting up big plays.
So, Ryan, we broke down the keys to the game. Those are the things that we think Notre Dame has to do. Special teams wise, it's really not about – if you can make a big play, great. Notre Dame blocked the punt against Navy last year. Phenomenal. Yep. That's wonderful. The big key for me, special teams wise, in a game like this is the late, great Lou Emoji had this quote. He literally had one key every week for special teams when he and I did shows together. It was he basically said, like, special teams needs to take like the doctor's oath, right? Do no harm. That was it. That's what Lou would say. He would say all the time, hey, Lou, what are the special teams keys for this week? Do no harm. That was really it. Now, would it be great to get some return yards? That'd be huge. I mean, that's sure. Those type of things are always important. Being able to get those hidden yards that you like to say, well, the offense only had, and I pointed this out. I've said this before. I've used this example before, Ryan, where when I was at Muhlenberg College in 2002, we won 10 games. We went to the college football playoff for the first time, college football playoffs for the first time in school history. We won our playoff game by 50. I mean, we were a great football team. We were really good on offense. My running back that year, Matt Bernardo, was an All-American, right? He had over 20 touchdowns that year. We were a great offense. Averaged about 40 points a game. We averaged about 350 yards of offense. That's it. Why? Because our special team, the hidden yards in the special teams game, we had multiple touchdowns on special teams. We would block kicks and get the ball at midfield. Our punt returner, Cody Shea, would have a 15, 20-yard return. So instead of getting the ball at the 30, we're getting it at midfield. Those type of things are huge, and they're nice to have, but you don't need that to beat Navy. What you need to beat Navy is don't shank a punt. Don't leave points on the field because you missed a field goal. Don't give up a long return that gives Navy's offense short fields. Those are the type of things that you have to avoid. That's really the key on special teams. It's Lou's quote, Lou Emoji's quote of do no harm. I mean, in a game like this now against Ohio State, we may be talking about, hey, you need to pull something out of your hat a little bit, but in this game, it's do no harm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, it's like I think do no harm is a good way to put it because it's like a clean sheets in like soccer, right? Like you just don't want to notice it a lot,
Right.
like a long snapper. What's the best quality of a long snapper? Michael Vincent talking about here, right? Is that I don't ever hear about him because
Right.
he just does his job.
Right.
And that's what you want, man. There's some long snappers that play in the NFL for like 15, 20 years, and you hear his name maybe once in his entire career because they did their job.
Right.
Spencer Schrader. The only time that we're going to go crazy about Spencer Schrader is if he's missing field goals. That's the only time that we're going to really bring him up a ton. Punting the same way, like it was like Jay Bramlett, right? It's like Jay Bramlett was great most of the time, but then he would have a shank every once in a while. Then you would
Right.
talk about that. Tyler Newsome, the same story. Just keep everything on schedule, man. Don't kill yourselves. Don't do anything egregious to make you just look like, dang, like that's just not very good football, right? I think that it's almost like a clean sheet. I just want a guy to not be noticed as much. Just make the plays that are in front of him, not kill us. Same thing for the
Right.
return game as well, man. Like I don't need a kick return to average 30 yards per kick return. I don't need a punt return to average 15 plus per punt return. I just need him to be good though, right? Like
Right.
consistent. Brandon Joseph wasn't flashy punt returner last year, but he did his job and it was good
Over
enough,
10
right?
yards a
It was
pop.
good.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
it was
over
good.
10 yards a pop. Now,
Very
would I
solid.
like to have a kick return that averages 30 yards? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Of course, I'd love to have Devin Hester, or Rocket Ismail, or Ricky Waters back there. But
Yeah,
it to your point,
you don't
it's not the
strive for
need.
being you don't
Right.
strive to be solid, but like as long
Right.
as you get that,
Right.
you're content with it. You know
You're
what I
okay.
mean? So yeah.
You're okay. So those are the keys to victory, in our opinion, for Notre Dame over Navy. Ryan, it is now time for game predictions. And so, what our predictions are going to be is we're going to take them any way we want, and we want to hear from you guys. And some of you have already put your predictions in here. I want to hear what you guys have to say about it. We're not going to do a mailbag today, so there are a couple super chats that we're going to answer at the end, but we're not. We're just going to kind of get into this. But I still want to hear from you guys as far as what your predictions are, Ryan. And one of the challenges of doing predictions this early in the season for me is we just don't know what either team is going to be yet. And
Right.
the greater uncertainty is there's of the 4 coordinators, right? Actually, of the 6 coordinators, if you want to get into special teams, there's one returner from last year, I believe. That's Al Golden. That's it. Navy
Sure.
has a new offensive and defensive coordinator. Now, that's a tad. I want to make sure we're clear. Their new defensive coordinator was their linebackers coach last year. So it's
Right.
more similar to the Jared Parker, because now the head coach is the former defensive coordinator is now the head coach, a guy that had been with him since 2019 at Navy and was with him at Kennesaw State. PJ Volker is now the defensive coordinator. So it's not quite like you're changing philosophies, right? But it's still a new coordinator. You have new offensive coordinators at both schools. And I believe Navy also has a new coordinator as well on special teams. So a lot of new coordinators, a lot of new faces. We don't really know what these teams are going to look like. So it can make the prediction even more daunting than normal.
Sure.
But I want to get into it, Ryan. And so we're going to give our predictions and we're going to talk about what you see. Like, where did you come from your prediction? How do you see the game playing out? And then also kind of find out if this prediction comes true, this is who I think will shine in the game. And if the prediction doesn't come true, what will be some of the reasons? So I'll ask those individually, Ryan. I'm just setting people up.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, what is your score prediction for this game, Ryan? And how did you get there?
I ended up going with 42-10 as my final, obviously in favor of Notre Dame. I actually originally, Brian, had it a little bit higher in Notre Dame's favor. I think I had like 49-10 at one point or 48-10, kind of a little bit of a crooked score there. But ultimately, I brought it down a little bit, not as much about the actual game. It's just the new first down clock stop rules, right? Like as far as it not stopping. So I brought down the scoring a little bit, which got me to 42-10. I really think this offense is going to come out and open up and be able to open it up a little bit, right? So I think that Notre Dame's going to be able to score at a pretty good premium. And one thing that I don't think we talk about enough sometimes with the experience factor, because I think of Navy's offense specifically, is that Navy's offense technically has some good experience coming back. 4 or 5 offensive linemen, quarterback that's played, obviously the fullback who's played. But I don't think all experience is always good experience, right? And I don't think we talk about that enough. Like I remember North Carolina's offensive line last year, where you're like, man, they got 4 or 5 starters coming back. It's like, guys, they're not very good.
They weren't good. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think Navy's offense has a little bit of that. So I just really don't see them scoring a ton on a defense in a second year under Al Golden, a defense that should be more well understood, should be more muscle memory attached this year than it was last year. So I ended up 42-10 because I think Notre Dame's offense opens up a little bit, and I think the defense is a little bit staunchier than it was in that game last year.
So Ryan, the next part of my question is, if this game, you said it was what was it again?
42-10.
42 to 10. So if this game goes that way, who are a couple players on offense and a couple players on defense that you see really shining in this game?
I know we have talked about offensively that Notre Dame doesn't have to necessarily come out and throw the football around the yard to be like that team, right? Like you can come establish your identity and then let Sam Hartman kind of work off of it and be a balanced offense. I actually think that this might be a game where Jared Parker comes out and says, let's open up the run game a little bit with the pass to start out this game and get off to a little bit of a fast start passing the football. So I think Sam Hartman is going to come in and he's going to show exactly why people have been excited about seeing him in a Notre Dame uniform. So I think Sam Hartman's going to have a nice football game. And I think in the during the course of the game, one of these wide receivers especially is going to really step up. I kind of lean towards Tobias Merriweather because ultimately I just don't think that Navy has outside corners that are really going to be able to counteract that combination of length and explosiveness. So I think that he makes a couple big plays in this game. I think Notre Dame's passing game sets up the running game to be a lot more efficient than it was last year because they kind of open up the offense a little bit to start this game out.
You know, it's interesting, Ryan, when you talk about this Navy versus Notre Dame rivalry, there's somebody in the chat that said, I don't know, it's going to be hard to get 50 versus Navy. I'm curious how the new clock rules are going to impact that. But if you really think about it, when Notre Dame has come out smoking on offense, that's exactly what they've done. In 2019, they won 52-20 over a Navy team that went 11-2 that year. They scored 44 in 2018. They scored 49 in 2014. They scored 50 in 2012 and 56 in 2011. So when the Notre Dame offense is rolling, they have had that kind of success against Navy. Now, the one big difference between this Navy team and those Navy teams is this Navy team is legit good against stopping the run. Those ones were not. So I'm very curious how that's going to be, how that's going to play out. And then defensively, Ryan, who are some of the guys that you think could really, that are going to really, you can go that you think will shine, or do you think need to shine in order? Because like holding Navy to 10 in the opener is not going to be easy. That's a heck of a defensive performance, in my opinion, for Notre Dame in this game.
It is. I think that one player for me is JD Bertrand. I think that, he's just like one of those guys I think is just kind of built to play against a triple option, right? He's a heady, physical kid that's going to be in the right spots more often than not. So I think that he's going to rack up a ton of tackles. And I am going to lead towards what you said to me yesterday, Brian, is that I think Cam Hart's going to have a big play in this football game. I don't know if it's going to be a pick six. I don't know if it's going to be an interception in general, but there's going to be some big play in this game that Cam Hart's going to be involved in. Maybe he scoops and scores. Maybe he picks it. Maybe he forces a fumble. I don't know. But I think that everyone's talking about Benjamin Morrison this offseason, and for very good reason, right? One of the best corners in college football. But I think Cam Hart in the secondary is going to steal a little bit of the lore in this one, at least early on in this game. And I think he makes a big play, but I think JD Bertrand has a mess of tackles in this one.
I think him not playing in last year's game is one of the more overlooked aspects of recalling that game from people. And the fact that he was a late scratch. So he took reps last year leading into the game. And if you look at what JD, it's not only because of JD, but he did play the year before and they completely shut Navy down, 134-6 in 2021. And so we're going to see how that kind of goes. I'm curious to see how that plays out, right? So now the flip side to your prediction. If the game is more competitive, what do you think are going to be factors to that game being more competitive more competitive than your prediction? Because again, 42-10, right?
Yes.
Let's say it's a much more competitive game. What would be the reasons why? What would be your your biggest concerns, I guess, is a way of looking at it?
The only thing offensively that I think has really hamstrung Notre Dame is if they are something that we think that they're not going to be, right, Brian? And that's to be a little bit more diverse, right? If Notre Dame comes out and is just kind of I don't want to say mirror to last year, but a little bit more predictable than what we're expecting them to be, I think that limits your offense, obviously, right? Because maybe your run game doesn't get going and it forces Sam Hartman to have to do things a little bit more out of structure than maybe you wanted to go into this game. So I think it's just maybe a little bit of complacency or a little bit of just predictability offensively. I think that's the biggest thing that could hamstring this offense against the Navy team. Because honestly, if Notre Dame's clicking, I just don't think Navy has anything that could stop them. Like, I really don't. I think that they have every tool in the holster to be able to make a lot of big plays in this game. So I think it's predictability offensively and defensively. I mean, honestly, it's being your own worst enemy. I really do think that, man. It's like the wrong spots, making a rash judgment, not attacking the pitch man hard enough on an outside, like getting sucked up against a pass play. So I think it sounds weird because we're going to go to like the Ohio State game at some point, right? Even NC State, where we're going to say, if this guy doesn't match up against this player, then that player could win a lot of plays, right? But I think it's more of a lapses of what Notre Dame could do that's going to affect them, right? It's what they're not doing more than what Navy's going to do, if that
Agree
makes
completely.
sense. Yeah.
I would say that's what happened. Would you not say, Ryan, that that's exactly what happened last year in the second half? It was more about, 100%. Of course, Navy changed their pressures and all that, but Notre Dame not handling it well, to me, is
100%.
was the big reason.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So I really think it's miscues defensively, not being assignment sound, and offensively, it's if they're not as unpredictable as I'm hoping they are, then they get in that predictable kind of slump like we saw in not quite as bad as last year's second half, but they get into like something similar where it's just like, we know what you're doing, guys. Like, you have to do something. Where's the adjustment to this? There's just no adjustment. So I think it's Notre Dame's own worst enemy this game if this game is close.
Here's one, Ryan, and I didn't give you a heads up on this. I want this to be a little bit of fun today. If Notre Dame wins the game the way that you think they're going to win the game, or not you think, but the way you're predicting they're going to win the game, what is going to be the biggest storyline coming out of that game about Notre Dame?
I think it's going to be Jared Parker, honestly. Like, I think that if Notre Dame comes out offensively the way I think they can, no one's going to talk as much about Sam Hartman because it's like, okay, Sam Hartman still throws for a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. Cool. Like, we've seen that in the past already, right? I think the storyline is going to be Notre Dame looks interesting offensively. Like, wow, they're actually doing some different stuff. So I think Jared Parker is going to get a lot of the headlines. The new offense at Notre Dame is going to get a lot of the headlines. So I don't think it's going to be an individual player as much. I think it's more an identity thing that people are going to look at and be like, well, I don't want to say shocked. They're going to be like, the Notre Dame team looks a little bit more creative than maybe they have in years past offensively.
Ryan, I'm going to give mine. I have literally written down a different score 3 times just during the show. That's how back and forth I've been on this prediction. And I was at one point in time, here's some different scores I've come up with this week. 34-20, 31-17, 30-13, 49-10. I've been all over the map because I've been able to convince myself of it going in a million different directions because of the uncertainty of game one and of the triple option. But what I settled down on, Ryan, is kind of what I think it should be, in my opinion, and what I think it should be, as far as at least kind of like this is a good performance, not like a wow. Like, could they go out there and light Navy up? Yeah, we've seen them do it before, Ryan. We've seen them do it recently. A really good Navy team. They hung a 52 spot on like 3 seasons ago.
50 burger,
but more so, just this is what a good Notre Dame performance looks like, and that's 38-13. Sure. And I think Navy will have some plays where they may hit a big play to set up a touchdown. They may get a short field on something to set up a touchdown. They'll have 3 scoring possessions. Notre Dame's red zone defense is going to show a little bit of improvement because they're going to force 2 field goals in those situations, which is important for them. I think the Notre Dame offense is going to be explosive, but is also going to have some game one rust, right? That just is kind of part of game one, especially if there's a little bit of rain, which there's some talk about there being some rain this weekend too. But if Notre Dame wins 38-13, I'm a very happy guy, right? Because what have I said my number one objective in this game is, Ryan? Survive and advance. I mean, it's the triple option. It's the new system. Yes, I'll be disappointed if they win 21-20, but sure, I won't care because the big thing is get the W, come back home and get right against Tennessee State. That's really where I'm at. But as far as what a good performance would be, 38-13 is where I'm at. And I think that's where I've settled in on during the show. You'll see it, Ryan. Like literally, you can see how I keep writing over the score. See how it's dark? Because I keep writing over the score. I'm like changing it a bunch of different times, even during the show, and I've been changing it all week. But 38-13, had to make it official. 38-13 is where I'm going, Ryan. Now, as far as who I think the sort of the guys that'll shine, I think if Notre Dame scores 38 or more points, we will be talking about Sam Hartman shining. And not just because he threw for a bunch of yards, but it's what hurt them last year. It's the decision making. It's getting the protection set correctly. It's getting the RPOs pulled and thrown appropriately. It's making sure you're staying ahead of schedule. It's that calming presence on offense when Navy starts to heat you up. I got this. We're good. Get the ball out. Get that 1st and 10 completion for 7 yards. It may not seem like oh, wow, that's great, but Notre Dame could have had a lot more success in the second half if they just could have made some of those type of throws. So I think that calming presence will be the thing that helps them sort of be settled down and have a good day on offense. I don't think 38 points against Navy is lighting the world on fire, but it's a good performance against what I think is a pretty decent defense that gave up 24 points per game last year with an abysmal offense.
Yep.
And so that's where I'm at when it comes to that. He's going to have to play well. And then, of course, if he plays well, I think we're going to see some receivers play well. I like the Tobias pick. I'm going to go with Chris Tyree just because I just have a feeling that we're going to see them really work him into the offense early for the reasons that we discussed. Maybe that's more wishful thinking to kind of keep you at Navy off balance, with the jets, maybe a reverse, some screens, but then also getting him involved in the crossers, the overs, the wheels, the seams, trying to create some of those big play opportunities in the game. Defensively, Ryan, you nailed JD Bertrand. I don't need to add to that. I mean, the inside linebackers have to be really good for this to work. There's a reason when we talk about, who are the option killers. It's always some linebacker. Yeah. You remember how good Drew White was coming off the bench in 2018 when Drew Tranquil got hurt. Yep. And I remember Greer Martini obviously was great against the option. I mean, you've always had those guys that it's always a linebacker because they play such an important role. Because and the reason it's also JD, Ryan, is similar to what I said about Sam Hartman. JD's not just the Mike linebacker is important to stopping the option, but it's like that's your leader, that's your captain, that's your Mike. That's the guy that makes sure that the calls are right, the adjustment calls are made correctly, making sure guys are getting lined up appropriately. He can look at a Jalen Steed and said, "Go there and do this." Right. And is going to be important for this defense. And so that's why JD is that guy. And the other thing too, Ryan, is if Notre Dame shuts Navy's down and holds them to 13 or fewer points, the defensive tackles have to play well. Sure. And so, I mean, it's not just one guy. It's Riley Mills. It's Jason Onye. It's Gabriel Rubio. But a guy that I think could be really big in this game because of just his style of play, I could see Howard Cross having a Kurt Heinisch type of game. Remember when Kurt had like 10 tackles against Navy 2 years ago, just blew up their center all game long? I could see Howard Cross having a similar impact in this game.
Notre Dame always has that a little bit undersized defensive tackle that kills Navy. Like, wasn't Trevor Laws like incredible against Navy the one year? Like Derek Landry, I feel like was good against Navy. Like they always have that type of performance. And then there's always that random safety like in Duke Way who had like 20 tackles at one time against Navy. Like
didn't like Kyle McCarthy have like a mess of tackles against Navy one year as well? Yeah. Harrison Smith, I think, had a big game against Navy. I believe I thought he had one. Now I'm gonna have to go look it up, but I think like early in his career. Not early in his career, but early in Kelly's tenure, I believe one of the games they played against Navy, Harrison Smith also had a mess of tackles. I'm gonna go look that up real quick because I want to remember that.
I remember that in Duke Way game. I don't think I've ever seen a Notre Dame player have 20
or something.
Tackles.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. Yeah, Harrison had. Let's see, it wasn't that year. I must be wrong. He had 10. I thought he had more than that. I thought there was a game against Navy he had a bunch of tackles, but it looks like I am incorrect on that one. He had you know what? It was Air Force. He had 12 tackles against Air Force.
Gotcha.
In 2011. But yeah, I thought I could have swore Harrison Smith had that. But yeah, Chinadum had like 22 tackles in that game. That was a little nutty.
It was nuts.
Storyline coming out of this game, Ryan, is if Notre Dame wins the way that I think that they're going to win, I think two storylines are going to come out of it. One on offense, one on defense. The one on offense, and you kind of hit on this a little bit when you said about the interesting offense. To me, I'm going to get more specific. If Notre Dame wins this game impressively, people are going to come out saying, hey, you know what? Notre Dame's receivers are actually, they're not bad. Like the people that had the doubts are going to be
Yep.
like, wow, those guys made some plays. Like Chris Tyree looks comfortable there. Tobias Merriweather made some big plays in this game. I think that's going to be the big storyline. Because to your point, no one's like, oh wow, Sam Hartman's pretty good at throwing the football. Well, yeah,
Would have thought.
duh. But I think the question people have is, but does he have the same receivers they had at Wake Forest? Well, we'll
Sure.
find that out. And I think the storyline coming out is going to be that. And then the second one is, if Notre Dame does have the success that we're hoping that they're going to have in this game, another big part of it to me is going to be the play of the defensive line. People are going to come out, boy, this defensive line is pretty athletic. They are pretty good. If Notre Dame struggles, then I think those two positions are also going to be the storyline in this game. And that's the other part of it is if Notre Dame struggles in this game, there's going to be two storylines, and then I'm going to throw in a third. Notre Dame offensive line needs work. That's the third one. But I think the receivers and D-line are going to be storylines coming out of this game no matter which direction it goes. If they play really well, they're going to be a big part of it. If they don't play really well, they're going to be a big part of it. So will the offensive line on that last one.
The defensive line is a really interesting one, Brian, to backtrack for a second, because I talked about this a little bit, I think, in an article yesterday, but Notre Dame's defensive line is expected to take a huge step forward this year, right? And they've been incredibly impactful this offseason in this fall camp. What if they don't play well? Like, because think about the shockwaves that sends as a Notre Dame supporter or a person that watches it, right? Because you're expecting the defensive line to be really good. And then I almost get into a panic mode where I'm like, wait, does that mean the offensive line's even worse than maybe like we're expecting interior wise? Like, that's not good, man. That's not good. So I'm really intrigued to see the defensive line, though, because we have high expectations for what we've heard this offseason. And that makes me feel, but all on the other side of things, if they dominate, I'm like, okay, maybe that offense line is going to be okay. It's just that they were playing against a pretty dang good unit all offseason. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that defensive line is going to be very telling, I think, of how good the offense and defensive lines for Notre Dame are going to be up front, potentially.
That's right. Ryan, we're going to get a couple quick super chats here before we get out of here. We had a super chat from Fighting Irish Fan 91. He didn't get the question in there, but he did follow up with this question, and he said, what are your projections for the tight end room for yards, receptions, touchdowns? Have a feeling we're going to be focusing a lot more on running backs and receivers this year. Production decline, but possible team improvement. Ryan, I fully anticipate there being a production decline at tight end for the reasons that I think Fighting Irish Fan 91 nailed it. Look, it's not just that they don't have Michael Mayer. That's reason number one, there's going to be production decline. But the fact that the positions around the tight end room are going to be better. So I could see, 40 catches for 550 yards being a really good season this year for the tight ends as a room and say, hey, they had good production. And it's not just because they're not good, but it's also because the receivers are really good. But I could also see them doing more because I think that's an overlooked part of this team is, Mitchell Evans is a good football player. And if you just look at the production he had last year in the bowl game, Ryan, and expand that over the course of an entire season, that's 39 catches and 507 yards just with him. And he had 3 catches for 39 yards. Like that's not a ton of production.
Right.
So I do expect it to be greater than that. I think it'll be closer to like 50 to 55 catches for 700 yards or so. Is kind of where I'm at with the tight end room, Ryan. I think it'll be good production, but it won't be what Michael Mayer did because they won't need it to be. That's the big thing. They won't need it to be.
I'm hoping for Mitchell. If Mitchell Evans is the starting tight end throughout the entirety of the year, and then Holden Stace and others are kind of mixing in. I'm hoping that Mitchell could have production similar to what Cade Stover had for Ohio State last year. He had like 38 receptions for like 400 something yards and a few touchdowns. It's like, that's a nice season, right? Because you expect Mitchell Evans also as a junior to take a nice step forward as a blocker, right? Because he got better last year, but now to take another step, you just need him to be a good all-around football player, man. Like that's what you need, because then you can mix and match Holden Stace, Eli Raritan when he comes back, Davis Sherwood. You can mix and match and be a good tight end room. Cooper Flanagan maybe a little bit as well. You can mix and match and have a good tight end room. It's just you cannot expect someone to be as dynamic as what Michael Mayer was. Like you just can't.
Another part too is if Notre Dame's production gets anywhere close to the last 2 years, it's going to be because Holden Stace breaks out. And they've got 2 legit players at tight end, in my opinion.
Right.
And I really want to see this year, I want to see at least 2 throws in game, not game on the line, but like game is still in doubt throws this year to Davis Sherwood out of 12 personnel. If you're going to use Davis Sherwood this year as a blocker, you need to early in the season come out and say, we're not afraid to throw this kid to football out of these looks. So you better be prepared for it. And I think that would give teams something to think about. He's got a chance to he only needs to touch the ball 2-3 times to have a big impact. Right. Yep. So I that's something I would be curious to see as well.
In the limited opportunities from a practice perspective in the blue gold game, Davis Sherwood looks like he can catch the football, right? So, I mean, sure, I'm there.
Yeah. Rob Osgood with a super sticker. Rob, thank you very, very much. Slot King says Hartman over under pass yards at 237.5. Is that too low? Well, it depends on how the game goes, to be completely honest with you, Ryan. I mean, we saw and Sam Hartman's played against a triple option team before. They played against Army last year, and he went 13 of 19. They won 45-10. He went 13 of 19 for 246 yards and a touchdown.
Right. So it's close.
Yeah, I mean, it was close. It just, if Notre Dame blows Navy out, there's two ways of looking at it. One is, well, they're not going to throw for a bunch of yards, and he's not going to play more than 3 quarters. You say, yeah, okay. But to me, to blow Navy out, I don't think Notre Dame's going to do that the way they have in the past, where they just run all over Navy. Right. I think it's going to require them to be a little bit more disruptive, because and the perfect example is what we've seen the first time Notre Dame played a Brian Newberry defense, which was really good at stopping the run. And that was his first defense in 2019. That was Brian Newberry's first year. That year defensively, they held East Carolina to 84, Tulsa to 69. They held Memphis to 105, who was ranked that year. They held Air Force to 108. They held Notre Dame to 105. They held Kansas State to 46. The only team to rush for over 150 yards that year was Tulane. That's it. And again, I want to repeat, they held Kansas State to 46 yards rushing in a bowl game that year. Yep. Notre Dame scored 52 points. Why? Because they ripped them up through the air. Ian Book went 16 of 22 for 305 yards and a touchdown. Actually, I think he actually was a little less than that, because I think we had a backup throw the game. But if you remember, Ian had 5 touchdowns that game. He hit Braden Lindsey on a post route for a touchdown. If you remember that big play. It was like a 75-yard touchdown. Ian went that game. He was 14 of 20 for 284 yards and 5 touchdowns. I was correct. They brought Phil Dracovic in, and he had a couple balls. But 14 of 20, 284 yards, 5 touchdowns, and he played 3 quarters of football. If they blow Navy out, it'll look more like that. If it's a much more competitive game and he has to play 4 quarters, then, okay, I still think he gets above that. So I think he's going to get over either way because of the nature of this team. But if Notre Dame really rolls Navy, even Book, and when they scored 52 points, Ryan, he was at 284. That's not way above it, in my opinion. So I think we could see that. But I personally, if I was making a pick, and I don't gamble, so I wouldn't gamble on it, but if I was making the prediction, I would say he would be over on that one in this game.
I would also say over. That line, Slot Kings, for me looks like a situation where Vegas thinks that this game might be over kind of early, and there might be some backups in at some point. Like
that, or they're looking at Notre Dame's offense last year and thinking he's going to look more like that.
Yeah,
that would be the only other thing.
It would shock me if the latter was the case in that one, but we'll see.
Because he was only under that once last year. That was against Florida State in a 10-point road win. He was at 234, and then his next lowest was that 246 against Army. So he was only below that one time last season, and in 2021 he was only below that twice. One of them was a blowout win. So it's not something he's done often. So I think part of that too is blowout, Ryan. I think maybe part of it, because Notre Dame is a 20+ point favorite in this game.
20.5, I think it was. Yeah.
And then also, like you said, just the nature of the Notre Dame offense. So that's my thoughts on it. And then we have a super chat from RJG Irving. He says, I'm headed to Dublin after the show. We'll raise a glass to salute IB. Appreciate you, my man. Cheers, Notre Dame, 37-13, assuming the twos play about 20 minutes. I would love that. I don't know if 37 points is going to necessarily be enough to get the twos into the game in the middle of the third quarter, which is basically what it would be if they're playing 20 minutes. But I would love it, to be honest with you. Certainly
I love it too. Make sure that toast is a little Irish whiskey, sir.
There you go.
I'm here for it.
And then last one here from Pete Weber with a super chat. Thank you, Pete. 2 days away, fellas. Thanks, Brian and Ryan, for all the hard work this offseason. It's time to let the big dogs eat. Who do you think you are? I am. So yeah, it's here, Ryan. I mean, this has been a long offseason, a very long offseason. but it's here, man. And we're 2 days away. Tomorrow, we're going to have a mailbag. So Ryan and I will answer all your questions that you have for us tomorrow. We'll have tons of fun doing that. And then Saturday, it's game day, man. We'll have Sean and Vince are going to record a countdown to kickoff, and they'll put that up in the morning. If you've not listened to it yet, folks, listen to that. The video that Ryan put up. It's on the message board. I'm going to try to get it cleaned up, or not on the message board. It's on the YouTube channel. I'm going to try to get it cleaned up enough to put on the podcast app. I'm still working on trying to find some ways to do that because old Greer didn't have his headphones in. So it created a little bit of a sound issue. But he is clear, Ryan. When you listen to Greer, he comes across very clear. And it was a great show. Great questions, great answers. If you haven't watched that video yet, definitely check that out. Like I said, Ryan and I will be back tomorrow. We're going to have IB Nation Sports Talk tonight. Ryan and I will be back tomorrow for our mailbag. And then Saturday, it's game time, man. And so you and I are going to be together with Vince for our first post-game show of the year. That'll be fun. Our post-game show is going to look a little bit different this year, but not this one since I won't be at the game. So we're going to have some fun. But yeah, Ryan, in 48 hours from today, we'll be getting ready to kick off. It's 2:33 right now. We'll probably be about 2 or 3 minutes away from kickoff. So we're almost there, man. 48 hours. So, man, and we'll see. He's already going crazy, man. We're still 2 days away, and we'll see is going off. I love it.
We might have to put him in timeout just so he can chill out for a minute.
It's all good, man. Have that energy, baby. Ryan, like you said last year, man, it's okay to be excited. It's okay to be excited about this football team, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we're going to do. So, thanks for being with us, everybody. Ryan, thanks for being with me today. Enjoyed the show. He and I will be back tomorrow, folks. Make sure you're ready for that. Check out Sean tonight on IB Nation Sports Talk at 6 o'clock. And we have 2 new shows up today on CFB Nation. The CFB All-America crew made their conference by conference predictions. They also made their playoff picks. Their second show also made predictions for week 0. They've got their Notre Dame predictions. And then they also talked about some of the Notre Dame storylines for the season. So definitely check that out as well on CFB Nation. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We would really appreciate that 5-star review. And if you have not done so, folks, sign up for the message boards at boris@irishbreakdown.com. We'll talk to you again very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.